Hello, Broncos fans. You are joining the Orange and Blue View with Ron White and myself, Thomas Hall, hosting your latest show from Mile High Huddle on Saturday night. And welcome to the show. And thank you very much for joining. We have a pretty cool show tonight. I think we're going to reminisce about an old head coach, not that old, Vance Joseph. We're going to talk a little bit about him today and maybe some other coaching candidates. We've learned that Vance Joseph was at the Broncos headquarters for at least 8 hours, which does indicate a few things. So we're going to jump into that. But say hello to Ron. Ron, how you doing? How you doing this fine evening?
I am doing well. Welcome, Broncos country. It's good to see everyone in the chat here. Chat's loading up, and I'm excited to be talking about the new coaching news, or
Yeah.
potential coaching news, I should say. That's underway. So,
Yeah, it's taken long enough, right? I mean,
yes, it
we've been
has.
sitting here waiting and waiting for to see some of these names drop, and it's like they're instead of going from the top down, they're coming from the bottom up, and they'll eventually get there, kind of so to speak. It seems, but
Yeah.
we're starting to see them fill out the roster, which is really good, and now we just got to solidify the coordinator positions, and that's going to be an interest. It's already interesting. The names have been thrown out. A lot of them are interesting names, to say the least. They're talking about Rex Ryan, talking about Vance Joseph, talking about a few other people for defensive coordinator. I mean, even saw Vic Fangio's name back a while back. So, I mean, it's definitely interesting, to say the least, in Broncos country.
Agreed. Agreed.
Broncos country. If you make sure you hit the button and subscribe to Mile High Huddle YouTube. We've got a lot of great shows. We got a lot of great shows in the morning, in the evening. We've got our show here every Saturday night. There's other shows. There's a show every night, and I think almost every morning. So jump in there and check it out. If you subscribe, you get the alerts. And then you can also check out milehighhuddle.com. Ron's got some articles out there. I've got some articles out there. They're all good reads, so go check it out. Definitely go check it out, and also make sure you follow Scott Kennedy, who's here with us tonight and working in the background. Really appreciate that, because it was a little more difficult when you're by yourself trying to run the chat. So hopefully we get some good stuff in the chat this evening. I think it's a pretty hot topic. So Ron, give me your thoughts about Vance Joseph's name coming back in. I mean, this isn't just kind of a name that's just like a rumor. I mean, he was in the building for 8 hours interviewing. I mean, that's serious.
Yes. Yes. And it makes you wonder, what are they talking about, right? For 8 hours, at least 8 hours. So I do have some
Yeah.
mixed feelings about Vance Joseph being potentially the DC. He does obviously come with experience, right? He's well traveled in the league, been with Miami Dolphins. Of course, he had the stint with Denver, and then his time in Arizona as a DC. He did some pretty good things, right? Kind of somewhat turned that defense around for Arizona, and that's encouraging. I do worry about, if he were to be the DC in Denver, that second stint, right, in Denver, and kind of what that looks like. Now, there's some familiarity with the defense, right? I know he's predominantly known for the 3-4 style defense, and I think we have the players to kind of run that defense, but I don't know. I just think for me, there are just better candidates out there for that defensive coordinator position. Now, Thomas, if it were to happen, I wouldn't be, you know, that disappointed, right? Because again, he does have some skin in the game when it comes to defense, but I have a preference for some other candidates. So we'll see what Sean Payton and the team decide.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually don't like it at all, really. I mean, and my problem just isn't because I watched him on the sidelines as a head coach, and he looked like he was just completely out of his league. I mean, he did not look like he was ready for that. But it goes deeper than that for me. And before I jump into that, I'm going to say thank you to David McIlrath coming in with Super Chat. Man, we appreciate that. Thanks for the support.
Thank you, David.
And David says, good evening, Broncos country. Tom, Ron, and Deacon Scott. Mile High Huddle for life. Denver Broncos for life. Buck 'em. And I just, before I jump into my thoughts on Vance, I just want to say we've got Buckham shirts at Mile High Huddle merchandise. So I mean, from my perspective, they better back up the Buckham stuff, right? I mean, they better start winning, because this is we got the Let's Ride, and now we're looking at Buckham, and
Buckham.
before we start making up too many T-shirts with slogans, let's make it happen on the field. But no, my problem with Vance Joseph is, part because, like I said, we watched him on the sidelines with the Denver Broncos. Yeah, and it wasn't fun. It wasn't pretty. I mean, he was definitely not ready for that step up. But my problem with him goes a little bit deeper, because he didn't have any really significant defenses when he was a defensive coordinator. I mean, I think his highest rank was 11th for points against in the league, and he had 2 top 15 in points against, which was just admirable, but it's not otherworldly or anything like that. But he also had 2 very bottom ranked defenses, 28 and 31. And the other thing that I don't care for is his defense are not opportunistic. In this league, you have to take the ball away, and his defenses did not do a good job in doing that in really any season except for maybe one. I think he had maybe 23. So I have a lot of reservations about Vance Joseph, for sure. I mean,
yeah, and I definitely understand that. I know the statistics can be a little misleading, because I know there were a few years where that Arizona defense did somewhat climb the ladder in takeaways and fumbles. But I see where you're coming from, Thomas, in the sense that when you look at it holistically, especially in Denver, right? The defenses in Denver definitely weren't good. And you can say in Arizona there were highs, there were lows, right? But I really think Sean Payton is looking at it more from a experienced veteran perspective of, you know, he does know how to lead men, the leader of men, quote unquote. Right? So hopefully he can, kind of bring that to fruition, coach the guys up on defense, and hopefully they'll be able to play well. But only time will tell. And again, maybe the second stint, he might do better, right? I mean, at this time, it's only one side of the ball he'll be focused on, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, to think about that, the second trip around with Vance Joseph, just maybe he'll get lucky and things will happen for the right thing. But Michael Davis has a great point here. He's coming in from YouTube. He says, "Fun fact: Bowles, Jules, Sutton, the only remaining draft picks from BJ's coaching days." Yeah, things have changed quite a bit. I mean, there's still some familiar faces on the defense, but the thing that I really also don't care too much about. And I know people have said that Vance Joseph, oh yeah, he's really good at putting people in the players in the right position. But I remember watching him put Parks at inside linebacker on 1st and goal from the 1 yard line. And that's not putting players in position to succeed. That is not the right. I mean, Will Parks is a safety.
Right.
So I don't really agree with that too much. I think he's got a lot of holes in his resume from a defensive perspective. I know that he's really well liked, and people keep giving him chances. And I think when he was a defensive backs coach in Cincinnati, I think he did a very good job. But I think these step ups have been too quick for him, and he hasn't really succeeded. And I'll look back at Rex Ryan's, and that's another great name that's coming up, right? Rex Ryan, of all people. He had some very, very good defenses when he's a defensive coordinator. So those are the things that I need to look at when I'm saying, what's Vance Joseph really, what is he doing that has given him all these chances, and why people think he's such a hot commodity? I don't get it.
Yes. And we have Phil McLaughlin coming in here. Thank you, Phil. Phil says, "Evening, Thomas, Ron, and Deacon Scott. I don't want Vance. We'll take the 5 or Ryan before him. Go Broncos, Bucko." Thank you, Phil, for that comment. Much appreciated. And I see where Phil's coming from. Again, it's, I know some of Broncos country is, somewhat have mixed reviews. It's kind of like me with Vance. Some don't want him at all. And based on the resume, based on kind of the things we're talking about, I can see why you don't want him. Now, this is an interesting segue. I'm glad you mentioned Rex Ryan because I am, for all of his faults and commentary, I am a big Rex Ryan fan. And you brought up the point, Thomas, of I've looked at some of these defenses that Rex Ryan executed, and they've been pretty good, right?
Oh yeah,
They've
definitely.
been very good in categories, points allowed, takeaways, fumbles, and not only that, you have to make sure that we get the person that can, get their team up to play, right? That's a big thing here as well. And
It's a
I'm not
motivator.
saying that, yes, and I'm not saying that Vance Joseph won't do that, but I think players are aware of Rex Ryan's personality, right? They know that he sparks the fire when it comes to coaching, when it comes to coaching up his players, making sure things are executed properly. So, and that's part of the thing that Broncos country has been missing, right? Someone to kind of light a fire under them. And of course, we have Sean Payton that will do that, obviously, but I think the coordinators also need to do that as well. And
Absolutely.
Rex Ryan coming in to help with this defense, I think would be great.
Yeah. Well, Lawrence Rivera's coming in from Facebook. Man, a big time My Huddle listener, man. It's great to see you here. We appreciate the support and the comments. He says he wants VJ. He's look at his track record. He's only been getting better. That may be B. I think it's a good point. He seems to be getting better in people's minds. But if you look at what he's done, I don't know. I think it's kind of hit or miss. I think he's gotten better at certain seasons and not so great at other seasons. But I mean, it's a good point. Maybe he is just coming into his own, right? Maybe Vance Joseph is finally putting it all together, which is shocking to me after watching him on the sidelines. And maybe that experience helped. Maybe that experience being a head coach really kind of changed his mentality. But I just keep going back to, the putting players in position to succeed. I mean, when Isaiah Simmons was coming into the league, everybody thought he was going to be this great toolsy player. You can put him anywhere and you can do all sorts of great things with him. And he's been a good player, but he hasn't been outstanding. I mean, he hasn't been otherworldly by any chance. I mean, people expected a lot more. And Vance Joseph was supposed to use him in many different ways. And I'm looking at other players like Micah Parsons and these other players who are getting moved around and used in different ways are having great seasons. And I'm like, what is it that Vance Joseph has done to earn that reputation that he is able to put these players in these great positions? And maybe it's coming from when he was a defensive backs coach, but I just don't see it that often in in his defenses, especially when he was at Denver. I just don't see it. But like you said about Rex Ryan, though, man, he has results. He just has results. It's more results than Vance Joseph has, in my opinion. His sack record, his turnovers per season are incredible, and most of his defenses, many of them, produce tons of turnovers. I just don't see it with Vance Joseph. I mean, if these are our two candidates to look at, right? Vance Joseph and Rex Ryan, those two names just, I don't know. I mean, I like Rex Ryan in a way, but they're just not something that I thought was going to happen in Broncos country, right? I mean, it just those are names that I just don't understand that they're coming up. What happened to Desai? What happened to other people that they could look at? Why these two?
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point because I actually wondered the same thing, Thomas. Of where's Desai? I thought Desai was the favorite. Like,
Yeah,
Desai was, Fangio recommended Desai for Denver, and it's like, well, what happened? What happened, Peyton? But I think we know that Sean Payton's kind of going through, and he did say um, during the past week, during the Super Bowl week, that he's going to be thorough, right, with this search, with all these coordinator searches. So I think he's obviously going to do his due diligence, making sure that these coordinators, these candidates, going to have what it takes, and that could be par for the course, right? That could be some of these questions that come up in these interviews, Thomas. Of, hey, well, what are your defensive schemes? How do you see these matchups, right? How are you going to put players in the best position to win, right? Like if they're running this offensive scheme, what are you going to do defensively to counteract that? What's your
that's right.
plan for inside linebacker? How about edge? right? So I think there are these questions that I'm pretty sure Sean Payton is going to be asking as these interviews go through. So
Yeah, and I think David Yunkin in the chat down here has a good point. He doesn't think that anyone will respect Vance Joseph. And maybe that's true because there's still a lot of players left over, defensive players that are still there from the Vance Joseph days. Is he going to come back in to the Mile High City and command that respect after seeing him fail miserably in the Mile High City? Not to mention, I think a lot of fans will be disappointed too. And this is a business; it's an entertainment business, and obviously winning cures all. So if he comes in and has a great defense, but it's going to be a bit of a bitter pill to swallow for Broncos country if Vance Joseph is the defensive coordinator.
yeah, I agree. I mean, Vance Joseph doesn't get butts in the seats, right? He's
Yeah,
like it's the defense. I guess I understand part of the reason, and I think you brought it up earlier, where we saw in Cincinnati, we saw at Miami to a degree where the defensive backs, that's like the secondary was somewhat solid. And I think, with the AFC West being more of what the league overall is kind of more passing, but of course we have Mahomes and Herbert in division and thinking from a passing DB's perspective, that could be the reason that he was set up for an interview. But I think we need to look at, defenses overall and seeing exactly what Desai versus Rex Ryan versus uh, Vance Joseph, and kind of looking at some of these numbers and seeing who would be the best for the scheme we run with our players. And I hope Sean Payton is looking at that. Again, I think it's some of it's checking boxes, making sure we kind of go through some of them, but also kind of making sure that you know you have Patrick Surtain, you have Justin Simmons, you have all of these skilled players on defense who can coach these players the best, who can get us back to the Vangio defensive days, the Evero defense, right? Making sure that we stay consistent, at least a top 5 unit throughout the season. So just kind of some things to consider.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'm not a big Rex Ryan fan, really. I mean, I think he's had a great track record. Don't get me wrong, but there are some chinks in the armor, so to speak, right? Like he had a reputation for having a very overcomplicated defense,
Mm-hmm.
and people complained about that they weren't allowed to just play and flow to the ball and do their thing. They had to think a lot, and coming in, have not been a defensive coordinator, and this is a different scheme. I mean, he runs a lot of cover 3, so it's a different scheme. It's going to be hard to acclimate these players. Not that they can't do it. I'm not saying they can't do it, but that has been a bit of a, I would say, a complaint from players for Rex Ryan. He still gets results though, but some players are able to do that. And the second thing that I right now, I mean, they can fix it in through maybe hopefully for free agency or from the draft. But right now, there's not a good cover inside linebacker. And I'll tell you, Rex, Bart Scott complained about being pulled out of the game a lot and David Harris played because he could cover. And I'll tell you that we don't see anybody right now on the Broncos inside linebacker who's great at covering, and that's going to leave weak spots. With his scheme doing a lot of cover 3, it's going to weak spots in the flat, a little bit in the seam, and I just there are some things about him. Every team can't have a great player at every position. So if Rex Ryan is the guy, I hope he can see the deficiencies and cover it up and not just go back to I got to have one linebacker in the middle, but that also opens you up to other things, man. It's just, I don't know. There's just not a slam dunk candidate for me out there right now. I mean, Fangio to me was, and Evero was as well. And both of them are gone. So it's a bit tough to take.
Yeah, and I agree. And to your point, I've been begging for this team to get an inside linebacker for years. And I don't think a lot of people have. And you've seen it, right? Where, you know, there are just gaping holes. Teams are running down our throat. And I hope that that is a weakness that we can get addressed, hopefully in free agency and or the draft. Because we can't have obviously people like Travis Kelsey just kind of running wild.
Yeah.
So we definitely need to address that. And I think once we kind of start beefing up edge, getting
Yes.
an inside linebacker or two, I think the DBs are solid for now, but maybe picking up a corner, maybe another safety, right? In the draft possibly. But I think once we can address those deficiencies, I think we'll start to see this defense schematically come together, and some of those things will be addressed. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem with edge isn't necessarily they don't have the right players; they just don't have the healthy players.
healthy, yes,
If they could get Gregory to play 17 games, it'd be a miracle,
hmm
and it would be a huge
hmm
boost for the defense. He played what, 6 games at most? I can't even remember. It seemed like very few games that
yeah,
he even played. So that's a big concern. Also, the other concern is defensive line to me, right? Defensive line's it's a question mark, especially if Draymond Jones takes out, because Deshaun Williams, another starter, he's an unrestricted free agent. So you're going to have to bring in some defensive linemen to play those schemes, either
agree,
Vance Joseph or Rex Ryan or whoever they bring in. I think that's a huge hole. And then you're right about the inside linebacker. They need to bring in the right inside linebacker.
right,
They can't just bring in an inside linebacker who's good at tackling. That, like Singleton, he's a tackling machine. I love the old throwback kind of inside linebacker, but today you need somebody that's got a more versatile skill set, coverage, and he just misses the. It doesn't have as many impact plays. And in today's NFL, you have to give your offenses more chances, and that's taking the ball away. That's why I lean towards Rex Ryan, because his defenses did have a track record of creating turnovers, and I don't think Vance Joseph had that track record.
agree. I'm right there with you, Thomas. Yep.
Yep. And I mean, we're definitely just kind of spitballing here. Who knows if these are really the candidates? Like, we've been surprised so many times. Like, we're looking at potentials who they were going to bring in, and they've been surprised. I mean, the special teams coordinator, that was a surprise to me.
It was.
And I'm drawing a blank on his name. Man, sorry, I can't think of his name
I
off
think
the
it's
top of my head.
Ben Cotigua, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. That was a surprise. Everybody thought it was going to be somebody else. At least I did. And he just kind of surprised. So who knows what they're going to bring in, right? Who knows? So it's interesting. But can you think of anybody else besides is there any like secret candidate out there that they may be talking to that just is going to surprise everybody? Because I cannot think of anybody.
No one comes to mind, unless it's in a young, hotshot, up and coming DC that Sean Payton kind of has on the back burner. But other
Right.
than that, I do not have any specific names. I think
Yeah.
the main ones, I think, for this cycle have kind of already been under Denver's radar.
Right.
And, as I mentioned earlier, I really think Sean Payton wants to adhere to experience and veteran. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of why those three candidates are kind of the higher priority of the folks that are out there.
Yeah, and it's surprising to me because when it first started coming down, there was a lot of inexperienced people that were getting their names brought up, and I was kind of thinking that was refreshing, because when I heard the name Sean Payton getting hired, he's a great coach, but I was like, oh, he's just going to grab defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator he's familiar with,
Yeah.
right, and that just like the Joe Lombardi or whatever, just grab him and bring him on board because he's familiar. But when these names started to come out, they were young, kind of up and comers that weren't on everybody's radar. And it made me think that Sean Payton wants to bring in those, some sort of different perspective, a little bit younger perspective, maybe, or at least a different one. You don't have to be younger, and I was actually kind of pleased with that. Like, he doesn't want the familiar. He wants something different. And that's what Broncos country needs is some juice, some sort of spark. But now we're going the other way, where we're like looking at these, older names out there, right? Like, it's strange to me that this is where it's now heading. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the other candidates have they've gotten jobs. They've already gotten jobs, and it's been a little bit too slow for my liking. I know that they want to do it methodically, but it's been pretty slow.
Yes. Yes.
So the other name that's out there, possibly that they could try and convince, there's a lot of rumors about it. It's Mike Zimmer, right? There are a lot of rumors. He's supposed to be going to Colorado. He's supposed to be in the college ranks with Dion, but you could probably convince him to come to the NFL. How do you feel about Mike Zimmer?
I am a big Mike Zimmer fan as well. Actually, I would prefer him over Rex Ryan and, of course, over Vance Joseph.
Okay.
I know it didn't work out too well, obviously, in Minnesota with Mike Zimmer, but Mike Zimmer really knows how to call good defenses. Now, I think similar to how it is just with any DC that comes in, right? It's going to be bringing in the right players. And from what I've heard, I know Mike Zimmer's scheme is very complex, or it can be. So making sure that players can adapt, adjust to that scheme. But I'm all for bringing Mike Zimmer in just to kind of feel him out, see what he's talking about. As far as how he can put players in the best position to win. How does he see this defense going, and things of that nature. So I actually like Mike Zimmer as well. I think he's one of these standout candidates that we're not really talking about too much.
Yeah. There's a lot of rumors, and yeah, he over Rex Ryan and Vance Joseph. I'd take Mike Zimmer. Really, I think he's got a great track record. I think he's a good coach. He like you said, he didn't work out as a head coach in Minnesota, but he had some pretty good teams there. I mean, he wasn't a total failure as a head coach. He wasn't Josh McDaniels-esque by any means. So, Keith Brugman, thank you for coming in from Facebook. Facebook stars appreciate the support. We enjoy having you on here, Keith. You have some great comments, and it's enjoyable to have you in the comments and the support. So we really appreciate it. And Ernie Mays is coming in. Hello, Thomas and Ron and Scott, if he's here. He is here, and I think thankful for that, because it is a hard thing to try and run everything and talk at the same time. I guess like chewing gum and talking at the same time, or walking. I don't know.
Thank you, Ernie.
But don't forget, to subscribe to this, to the channel here, and like our show. We are going to be here every Saturday, and we're going to be coming at you into the season when that comes back around, and we'll be the last show before the big games on Sunday. So definitely want to tune in to us. So make sure you set your reminders so you get it. So, and throw some support this way. We really appreciate it. So thank you very much. We're still talking about the defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph, Rex Ryan. Now we're talking about Mike Zimmer. If there's any other candidates out there that you guys have on your mind, throw it in the chat. Like somebody, there was that the guy from the Saints. I think he was the DB, defensive backs.
Chris Richard.
Yeah, Chris Richard. His name came up, and then he was gone. He's sticking around. He's not coming here. So it seems like the slowness to me is kind of missing out. I don't know. I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be like, hey, hurry up, because, I don't want to have that, I want that immediate gratification. Get me those coaches so I can talk about them and see them and be happy or sad or whatever. But it does seem a little slow, especially when you're looking around the league and you see Frank Reich with the Panthers. He's filled out his staff quite well. I mean, he's got a bunch of people already in there. They're ready to go. We're on the verge of, hitting the combine, or on the verge of, where it's free agent season coming up only in a couple more weeks. We got to see some action here in my mind. What do you think, Ron? I think they're moving too slow.
I was going to say the same thing, Thomas. I think they are. I mean, and again, I know Sean Payton likes to take his time, but it's been a long time to even get him.
For sure.
Right? And you mentioned like Frank Reich's filling out his staff nicely. D'Amico Ryans is filling out his staff nicely and doing it efficiently, but yet expeditiously. And I think, of course, we're getting into, combine and now the free agency time. So we need to, have this coaching staff at least somewhat starting to take shape, so that, key decisions can be made, right? So they can go and, run their teams, run their offenses, their defenses accordingly. So I do think it's going by a tad bit slow.
Yeah. Well, you think about it. Say they brought in Rex Ryan or Vance Joseph or whatever eventually.
Yeah.
These are the type of whatever scheme they're bringing in. They need to think about the free agent pickups that are coming in, right? Like who fits that scheme. And if they're still mulling over it, for a couple more weeks before this happens, which I hope it doesn't happen, because I'm actually getting kind of tired of talking about the coaching decisions to be made by the Broncos. I want to get into free agency, man, and I want to get into the draft. But really, I mean, they got to make plans. It doesn't just happen overnight. They're like, oh, well, we'll just go grab this guy or this guy. They need to understand what the scheme's going to be. They're going to need to understand how that scheme's going to fit with the current players and who they have to bring in to complement those players that aren't currently on the roster, and make also contingency plans, because just because they want that player doesn't mean they're going to get him. So they're going to have to find the second or third option and then plan for the draft. And it's getting down to the wire here in my mind. I mean, I think free agency starts March 15th.
Yes.
That is coming up in less than a month. So it doesn't give them a whole lot of time to prepare if they can't make this decision in the next few days, really.
Right. Right. And it also, even with some of these free agent signings, I mean, I know there's been talks about, getting another running back like a Saquon Barkley or, Miles Sanders, I think was floated out there, and inside linebacker as well. So, you're going to have these players, obviously, as we know, right, getting, offers from other teams, maybe interested in other teams as well, right, depending on their staffs that are already in place, right? So I just think that's kind of why the process needs to speed up a little, so we can be on a lot of these players' radars and can get them, into Denver as soon as possible. So
yeah, and so I'm a big inside linebacker fan. I have been forever. I love the nostalgia of the rangy middle linebacker roaming the middle and the heart of the defense type of thing. But the NFL's changed. I've got a couple names out there that they should go after. I mean, if Singleton doesn't get resigned, and I think he did deserve the chance to come back and play in this defense. Like I said, he needs a little more impact plays for my liking, so they can't give him too much money. But there's some names out there that I think would fit regardless of who they bring in, and still be that kind of newer linebacker, so to speak. And Tremaine Edmonds is one that I really like. I think he can be a good fit. And then there's some less expensive ones out there. So some names that really aren't being floated out there, but I think they could step in, and especially in like a Rex Ryan type defense. And that's David Long and a Landon Roberts. And then the one that I think is a younger version of Singleton is Bobby Okereke, I think it's pronounced. So there's a few names out there that I think they could upgrade. I liked Jonas Griffith. Don't get me wrong. I liked him last year. I liked him at training camp. He got hurt, but I think they need to find somebody. And to me, like, I loved watching Carl Mecklenburg play. I loved Al Wilson and Michael Brooks back in the day, man. I really have a soft spot for the inside linebackers. Actually, I played the inside linebacker as well. So I wanted to bring in somebody really good. So what are your thoughts on those guys, Ron? I mean, let's talk about some inside linebackers here.
Yeah, those are some good ones. I've been looking at a few. I think Deion Jones set to be as well. I'm a big, even when he was in Atlanta, I was a big Deion Jones fan. And I think he can definitely come in and help this inside linebacking core. I think Levante David as well. I know those guys are probably going to be a little bit costly at the position, but a guy can dream, right, on some of his some of his candidates here. Now, I know some cheaper options. Maybe include Corey Littleton. I know Denzel Perryman as well. I believe Devin Bush too. So there might be some cheaper options there that I think the Broncos can take a look at. But there definitely needs to be an upgrade, because again, Alex Singleton is good, solid, right? He's a tackling machine, understandably so. But we definitely need, and I think you alluded to it earlier, that one that can kind of run sideline to sideline and cover,
right?
And that's missing. So I think a few of those guys, between the ones you were talking about and then the ones I just brought up, should definitely help with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Gary Palmer is coming in. The legend Gary Palmer is coming in with a comment and a super chat. Thank you, Gary. We appreciate the support here. Keep the lights on, so to speak, and keep everything running while we're getting the show going. He says, "Good evening, Thomas, Ron, and Scott. Sean is being Sean. It's hard, but I'm trusting his process. Mile High Huddle for life, Buckham." And that's a voice of reason, Gary. You're right. I mean, we are anxious. Everybody's anxious. I think this has a lot to do with we're anxious to start winning again. That's the thing. Like, get the coaches in place, get everything set so that we can be excited about winning again. And I'll tell you, Ron, I know Sean Payton's a great coach. I have some definitely appreciation for him coming in and be able to turn this around. But I am really having reservation. I'm like being very reserved with my excitement because I've been excited for a couple coaching cycles and I was disappointed. And I don't want to get excited again. And maybe that's been the problem. Maybe I've jinxed Broncos country by being really excited, overly excited, and not succeeding. So now I'm going to try the other way, and hopefully it sends out good vibes that I'm not waiting I'm not expecting a lot of big wins. But thank you very much, Gary, for coming with that super chat. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Gary Palmer, for that. That's much appreciated. And I share your sentiment, Thomas, about just being excited these past few coaching cycles. We've, it's been new blood. So with that, it's, we're going to go in a different direction. We're trying to get to the playoffs, but I think we were still excited, but there was still some unknown there for us,
Yeah.
just because, with Vance Joseph and Vic Fangio and now Nathaniel Hackett, we were encouraged and we were optimistic that they kind of had that mind to turn the team around. Well, this time we kind of know what we're getting, right?
Yeah.
We're getting, an experienced coach that plays no game, that is about business, that can definitely turn this team around. So I would say, Broncos country, I hope that this isn't the days of yesteryear. You should be more than excited, but more than encouraged that you have experience at head coach that that we should get to the playoffs. I mean, it should be a playoff season. So
I hope so. It has to be.
yeah,
Man, I'm so tired of the losing because, before I get to Keith here, Keith, appreciate you coming. I just want to say I've been watching the Broncos in the heyday, man. I started in the early 80s and I saw all the success. And now it's weird to sit here and watch all these consecutive seasons of losses. Keith Brugman, thank you very much for
thank you,
coming in
Keith.
from Facebook. And he's got an old familiar name for us. His favorite free agent possibility is getting Connor McGovern back as a Denver Bronco, who's been playing pretty good center for the New York Jets. What do you think? You think that's a good choice to bring McGovern back with the history with the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, I'd be okay with McGovern coming back. You're right. I think he's been doing pretty well at center um, there, and bringing him back. I think he would be able to come in and with the new offensive line coach help this team out. I think at center it's been, we all have witnessed Glasgow, the Kitchenberry. It's been lackluster. It's been mediocre. It hasn't been living up to expectations at all. So I'm with you there, Keith. I think Connor McGovern would be a big upgrade over those two and could definitely help this offensive line out. What say you, Thomas?
It's a shame that we let him walk. We
Yeah.
saw him leave, and it's a bit of a shame, in my opinion, because you don't want to give up on your draft picks. But I think he left in free agency, and they weren't willing to pay him. But he's 29 and he's going to be 30. And I think, looking at the analytics when it comes to offensive linemen and their aging, it's not bad. That's a time when they're still kind of got some gas left in the tank. I would not be willing to give him a long-term contract. Give him, see what you can get for him. I think he's a solid player. And let's face it, Cushenberry was a failure really at center. And I thought he was going to be a steal. I thought third round steal. Cushenberry's coming in. This is going to be great. He has not performed well, and that has really hurt the offense. And then when, we saw the differences when Glasgow got in, and Glasgow he's just not, doesn't have too many injuries, getting up there in age is kind of, he's not, but he did solidify that center position a little bit better than Cushenberry did. So bringing in a more experienced guy who can solidify that position, I think is a great thing for the Broncos. I have some other ideas of who I should bring in, who they should bring in, actually for the center position other than Connor McGovern. But before I get there, we're going to talk about Garth Knight here coming in. Thank you for the support with the super chat. Garth says, "Hey TNR," which is great. TNR, that's a great name. TNR.
I like it.
I think when I was a youngster, where I grew up, there was a bar called TNR, so it kind of has some special place in my heart. He says, "I'm with you too on Zimmer if he's available. You all talked me into it over Rex." Well, I'm glad we did. I was more Ron. Ron really talked about Zimmer quite a bit. Likes him a lot. I would go with Zimmer for a couple of reasons, but mostly because it's kind of fresh. Rex has been out of it for a while. Not that he would forget. I mean, he's forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. That's for sure. But the game does change, and he hasn't coached in 2016, and he hasn't been a defensive coordinator for much longer than that. So I'm with you. I'd take Zimmer. So Garth, I appreciate that, and I think Zimmer's would be a good choice. But it's kind of, I don't know if that's just a big rumor. Like we haven't. Have you heard anything about Zimmer coming in for even a informal chat?
I have not, at least not coming in. And I know, it's just kind of been floated out there as a possibility, but I haven't heard him, coming in for a chat or anything scheduled. So, but again,
Yeah.
I'm with you there, Garth. Zimmer would be, I think, out of all the candidates now, of course, if you were a formal candidate, Zimmer would be really high on my list. So.
Yeah, and let's just jump back to center for just a second. So one of the names that I kind of like that I think would be more of a long-term answer at center than McGovern if you're going to spend the money, and that's Evan Brown. He's played center. I think he was guard last year, but he's got center experience, and he's really one of those up-and-comers, still kind of young. I think he could step in and be a longer-term answer. But, you can't fix the offensive line with just a bunch of high-priced free agents. You can't spend all that money. So you've got to pick and choose. So if you spend the money at right tackle, maybe you skimp a little bit at center. So I've got a name, and I may have told you this before, but I would take a chance on Rodney Hudson just for a 1 year, kind of solidify the center position for a year until you can find a real young up and comer in the draft that you can develop. But there's a few choices. McGovern's a good one, but I think I kind of like Evan Brown a little bit better for my money. I don't know. What do you think, Ron, on that?
Yeah, you actually took the name out of my mouth, Rodney
Okay.
Hudson. Rodney Hudson is who I've been eyeing, and I would hope. Now I know he probably won't be cheap, but I mean with centers, it's not too bad when it comes to that AAV. But I think I like Rodney Hudson. Another name also is Garrett Bradbury from Minnesota.
Okay. Yep.
That might be a possibility. Um, and then there's the Tyler Larson from Washington. So there are a few options that probably wouldn't cost you that much, that you can maybe look at targeting in free agency for sure.
Sure. And the reason why, and I'll tell you the reason why I targeted Rodney Hudson.
Mhm.
He's been injured. He I think he only played 4 games last year. He's injury bug, but so go and check out Mile High Huddle. There's an article about offensive linemen that I wrote. It's all based on analytics and age. And for some reason, offensive linemen tend to have a resurgence at 34, where they actually start to get Pro Bowl awards or All Pro awards again. And if you're going to take a chance on somebody, I mean, he's not going to command a big contract. Everybody knows he's kind of at the end of his career. Get a 1-year deal, have him come in and play, and then hope you hit pay dirt, right? Like hope that he has this resurgence like others have, and he plays at the level he used to play at, because he was a very good center. I mean, he was solid. He I think he got a second team All Pro, went to a few Pro Bowls. Maybe you just strike gold for 1 year while you spend the money on the other 2 positions that you need to spend money on, and you have a solid offensive line for Russell Wilson to do his work.
Yeah. Jason Kelsey was a name.
Oh,
That,
oh wow.
that actually came to mind as you were saying. They kind of have that
Okay.
resurgence a little later.
Yeah.
Now, maybe getting away from the Eagles might be another story since he's played there a while. But hey, if the money's right and he can kind of come in and solidify it for sure. And Phil McLaughlin's coming in. Thank you, Phil. What about Kyle Fuller? 28 years played at Seattle. That's actually another name I was going to bring up as well. Thank you, Phil. I think Kyle Fuller, 28, not too young, not too old, kind of come in and help solidify at center, help protect Russ, and of course there's some familiarity there as well with Russ. So that could definitely be an option. What do you think there, Thomas?
Yeah, the age with offensive linemen doesn't worry me too much, especially at that age. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you look how offensive linemen kind of they come in, they start to peak, coming around 24, 25,
Yeah.
26, they start to hit that peak and they start to decline, but it's a very slow decline. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like running back where you watch that line graph go up and then it's just boom, it's like off a cliff. So these a little bit older, coming into their first contract or first like free agent contract, those don't scare me at all. And I think that's a name that they should consider. At 28, he's got 4 years probably that he could play at a decent level. I don't know, how good he is, calling the line, calling out the protections and things like that or whatever, making the line calls. I don't know if he's really good at that or not, but somebody needs to come in with some savvy
Mm-hmm.
and bring back the old days of the Tom Nalen days. And nobody's going to be that good. Don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, he's really is a Hall of Famer in my mind, but someone who can come in like a Matt Paradis and start to really solidify that center position. And that's what's been lacking. And if that's a good name out there, I think you give him a good couple years on his deal so that he can kind of get acclimated to the line and his line mates and stay there and have some continuity across the offensive line. So absolutely. But I mean, I think there's going to be three changes on the offensive line. I really do. And you can't it's hard to fix it in one off season. You can do it, as I talked about on Legends of Mile High this week. I talked about how you could do it, but it takes some thought and some scenarios and some working around the salary cap and bringing in some draft picks. You're going to have to invest in draft picks. So
Yeah, most definitely. And I agree there as far as the changes on the O line. I'm thinking obviously center, we definitely need to get a right tackle. And I would hope that they would draft one.
right.
And also left guard, because we know Dalton Reisner hasn't lived up to expectations. So
Yeah,
those
for
those
sure.
are definitely the three major changes I see
Yeah,
coming.
yeah. So Keith Brugman's coming in from Facebook. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Keith. That's good. It's always great to see you here. And he says, I want your one dream player that you would want as a free agent or by trade. So I'm assuming any player at any position that we could take. But I mean, I guess be realistic. You can't go get Patrick Mahomes, right? Like you can't do something like that. So what do you think, Ron? Who do you think would come in realistically, dream free agent player or trade, even if you had to throw out some serious draft picks?
Thank you, Keith. I'm going to go with two, and they're from the same team.
Okay.
um, Debo Samuel and George Kittle.
Okay. The great names.
Uh, I'm very big on how Kyle Shanahan calls plays, his schemes. Obviously, with that, it's not just a scheme, but you have to have the right players. And what those two can do in the blocking game, yards after the catch, Debo lining up pretty much all over the field as a runner, as a receiver, just the athleticism that Debo Samuel has. He's an athlete. He's a true football player. So having that versatility on this team would be great. And you can say the same thing about George Kittle, right? A very competent blocker, able to line up in different formations as well, whatever Kyle calls,
Sure.
and just have that yak ability and just the sure hands of just catching it. So those would definitely be my two dream players um,
Nice.
that I would want to come to Denver via trade or free agency.
Those are great players, man. I love George Kittle too. But I really want to see what Dulcich has to offer. I think he's going to be a good one in the league. I'll tell you, I'll give you my two, one on the offense and one on the defense. I wanted Creed Humphrey in the draft, and the Kansas City Chiefs got lucky when they got Creed Humphrey when the Broncos got Cushenberry and it didn't work out. I would take Creed Humphrey. I think he would help solidify that line, and it's a position that you could have for many years. And I know it's not a sexy pick, but you got to fix the offensive line if you want Russell Wilson to play better. And then the other player that it's again back to the throwback days, rangy middle linebacker. I would love to have Roquan Smith on this team.
Mm-hmm.
He would he'd be that linebacker who could stay in the game. He makes impact plays all over the field. He's an impact player. And, like I said, that nostalgia of the great inside linebacker who could be in there by himself when they're going to like a three, going for like 5-6 DBs.
Yes.
He can still be out there, and still have that bulk. And, if they're going to try and pound the ball straight at him. So, yeah, I like that. Those aren't big names, but those are two that I would really appreciate to, if I could have my way.
And I'm glad you mentioned Creed. Well, both Creed Humphrey is is good. I was eyeing him as well, and it was unfortunate. Yeah, Casey took him, but Roquan Smith, like even going back to his days as a Chicago Bear, like even in Georgia, because I used to watch a lot of Georgia games. His ability sideline to sideline to be able to just match up in coverage with receivers and tight ends, and what he did with Chicago and now in Baltimore. I agree with you. It's one of those things that we can definitely use. And then depending on the scheme, right, I think it would pay tremendous dividends, right, if we were to get him. But yeah.
And Garth the Knight is coming in with the super. Thank you so much, Garth. Again, appreciate all your support. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to have you here with these comments. And he's asking Scott in the background. I'd be interested to hear Scott's take on fixing the O-line this offseason. He always seems glass half full and gives me hope. So, yeah, thank you for the support. And Scott is coming in, going to be back on Monday morning. So jump in there on breakfast. Broncos for breakfast, and you can ask him directly. But he says, but I'm bringing in 2 new guards, a new center, and 2 new offensive tackles at least. So you the whole new offensive line. Guards and centers are cheap. You can get by a lot better by addressing the interior. That's an interesting take. Whole new offensive line, which is that's a big task for sure. So thanks for jumping in there, Scott. Phil McLaughlin. So who do you guys think are possible trades to pick up some more draft picks? That's an interesting question. We'll probably go on this one for a little while and then we'll wrap up the show. But it's there's a lot of names that have been thrown out there, rumors, and people spatting on Twitter about it. So who do you think from the Broncos would bring in some more draft picks and why, Ron?
So from who
do you want to give up?
Well, no one really, but I think if we're looking to give someone up, and I'll go both sides of the ball here for offense, Courtland Sutton, because I know it was obviously we know that around the time of the trade deadline, it was floated out that Jerry Jeudy was up for trade, right? But we saw what down the stretch what Jerry Jeudy was able to do, and keeping him is definitely would be valuable. But I can see Courtland Sutton being on the block for offense. For defense, I don't know if he's worth much value. Maybe like Darby's was injured. Maybe like Ronald Darby. But those are really the two I can see possibly being traded.
Sure. Yeah. Phil, thank you for coming in from Facebook Stars. We appreciate the support as always. And thank you for being here, Phil. We love to see you in the chat, and we love the support. And I'll tell you, I am not a big fan of trading away players for draft picks. And the reason why I say that is, what you have in players, right? And so does the rest of the NFL. They know what you have in a player. The draft is a crapshoot. And even in the first round, it's 50% a coin flip to get an impact player at best. Even for the teams that are really good at drafting, they have misses. So I have a hard time getting rid of players that because even if they're a good player, the other teams know they know what you're going to get for them. You can't just like, oh, here's this crappy player that we're going to send your way, but give us something great for it. And I love Cortland Sutton, man. I do not want to. I think he can be used differently. I think he's going to be a good player. I think under Sean Payton, he's going to be a good player. I personally don't think you can trade anybody really with the tradable players. Their contracts really don't really fit, right? I mean, there's too much dead money. I know they've talked about Garrett Bowles, but then you're setting up your offensive line for even worse, even harder to do it. Darby, I think, is going to be a cap cut. I think once he gets healthy enough that they can cut him. I don't think they're going to try. I mean, if they could get something for him, great. He's a guy that's been injured far too often. So there's really not many players there that you can really get something for. I mean, like Bowles is hurt. You can't really get a lot from him. So who are you going to give up and actually get something in return that's worthwhile? You're going to get rid of, if you want a first round draft choice, you're going to get rid of Jerry Jeudy. And I wouldn't do it. He came on last year and he's their number one receiver. And there's just not anything to offer. And there's not a Von Miller out there that is on the team that you can trade. I mean, you can't trade Benito. You can't trade Gregory with his contract. I don't think you would want to trade Browning. So it's a really tough one for me to say. I mean, the only player that I could think of that you could trade and get something for that you just don't want to trade is Quinn Miners. I mean, you could trade him. You could get something. He's an up and comer that's going to be a solid offensive guard in the future. He's tenacious. He's a great player. But why would you want to? That's the thing. Like, I don't see very many players who are tradable that they want to trade. That's going to get them something. Because, the Broncos need a first round draft choice. If they're going to trade somebody, they need to get something good. They need to get a first rounder because that's where they're lacking. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah. And I agree with you to an extent, Thomas. And I think I told at the beginning of the statement of, I really don't want to trade anyone either.
Right.
Just because, I think under the proper coaching, this team as constructed can definitely do some things, but we just know how George Payton loves those picks, right? Yeah. He loves those picks. So, if we were to consider folks that were on the trading block, maybe getting a third rounder or fourth rounder, right, for one or two of those. I think he's something he'll explore for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the only player that you might be able to get a mid-round pick for, because he actually plays pretty good when he's out there. He's surprising as PJ Locke. I think some teams would look at him and say, yeah, he could probably come in and be a starter on some of the teams. They might be able to get something for him. But again, you're going to end up losing Kareem Jackson. You had an injured Caden Stearns. That's a position you're going to weaken by getting rid of him. But, he's somebody that I think teams would look at and say, yeah, he's got quality and he's young and he's going to, maybe be a starter down the road. So that's maybe one. But again, you're weakening your team. There's too many holes for this team to fill, and you're not going to be able to do it in the draft. You can get some good players in the draft. Don't get me wrong, but if the Broncos want to win next season, they're going to have to keep their players, and they're going to have to spend in free agency to try and solidify holes and use this draft for some young development players who can step in and then hopefully get those impact players early in the draft the following season.
Yep. Well said. Yep.
All right, folks. Broncos country, thank you for joining us. We're going to wind down now. Really appreciate all the support. And don't forget, go check out some of the other Mile High Huddle shows. Wednesday night, I'm on that show as Mile High Insiders. I do the Friday morning show, Legends of Mile High. They all have different perspectives. Broncos for Breakfast with Scott Kennedy. Don't forget to check those out. But again, join us here every Saturday night. It's going to be a fun show. And once we get done with these coaches and start talking about the draft and free agency, we're really going to kick it into high gear.
Yep.
So thank you very much, Ron. Any last words before we say goodbye?
So yeah, we hope that this coaching staff gets to be filled out here shortly. Be patient, Broncos country, as Sean Payton told us to be patient. And as Thomas mentioned, there's going to be more football, more news on the way as we kick it into high gear. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you, Broncos country. I am Thomas Hall, and my co-host is Ron White. And we thank you for joining us, and we will see you next Saturday. Have a great week and a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.